Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Grayzone. Here with Aaron Mate as always, and I'm somewhat frustrated. I was actually on time, but StreamYard has not been cooperating. Yesterday, I did an interview with Kim Iverson, and it wouldn't allow me to use my external mic. Several links later, it worked, and now, for whatever reason, StreamYard is not allowing me to use my usual camera, which makes it a little harder to produce this show. So bear with us, but we're here, and it's the content that matters and all the good company we have with all of you. Aaron, how's it going?
How's it going, Max? I'm fine, and thanks everybody for being here. Sorry for the delay in starting. That's what happens when you report factual information. Everything else becomes really difficult. I don't know, just technically, it's always hard to get things working. But we're.
I seriously believe this is not our fault, and I hope that some representative from StreamYard is watching. We're like the best customers.
Yeah, we can troubleshoot later, but yeah, look, it's been a while since we were on here, and the problem, every time there's a delay in our broadcasts for, on the main issue of our time, which is Gaza, countless atrocities happen, and it's like they just happen. They become so routine now that we're just supposed to accept everything as normal, even though every single day there's horror after horror, and we can't even keep track of all of them. So it just to think in such a short amount of time. We take a little bit of time off, and then all these unspeakable crimes happen, and then there's so many of them that we can't even get to all of them next time we do a show.
Yeah, well, there's so much happening in general. I want to cover that at the top, and we'll talk about it later on as well. But I also want to talk about what's happening in this country. I mean, we're going through a process of hyper-militarization. I don't think a lot of people are seeing it for what it is. And we're witnessing a gigantic scam unfold in real time. So we'll cover that, but I mean, it all connects back. Sometimes it feels like it often connects back to Tel Aviv. Benjamin Netanyahu has been in the White House. Just in the past few hours, the White House was filled with the smell of sulfur. And Benjamin Netanyahu met with Trump. This is the third meeting this year in Washington. The last one, Netanyahu basically gave Trump his marching orders that Netanyahu was going to bomb Iran, and Trump had to go along and basically rescue him from the war he couldn't finish. Now you have to assume that he was giving him more marching orders, that he insists on bombing Iran again if it supposedly restarts its nuclear program. And Netanyahu also wants more leeway to ethnically cleanse Gaza, something Trump has already explicitly endorsed. Here's a scene from inside the White House.
So I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's awarding you for the Peace Prize, which is well deserved, and you should get it.
Thank you very much. This I didn't know. Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming from you in particular, this is very meaningful. Thank you very much, baby.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. It's a great honor.
So,
and there's you can see Mike Huckabee, the Israeli-American reciprocal ambassador, at the end of the table next to John Ratcliffe, the Mossad stenographer, and then Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio, Netanyahu's team, one seat to the right of Netanyahu is Ron Dermer, who played a major role in lobbying Trump to strike Iran. And so Trump has been nominated by Netanyahu for the Nobel Prize, which means we can pretty much call it a wrap on Trump getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
And all those reports that we got in recent months that, some people were convinced by there being some sort of rift between Trump and Netanyahu. This just underscores again, that was a complete scam, a very smart one. it created the illusion of this, tension between Trump and Netanyahu, all while these two were working hand in glove to lay the groundwork for bombing Iran and continuing with Netanyahu's ethnic cleansing final solution in Gaza. And that's what they also discussed at the White House is, Trump's plans for, and Trump and Netanyahu's plans for what Netanyahu called free choice, where basically Palestinians will have the free choice to leave Gaza. He says they can stay, and they can stay to what? Like a completely destroyed society that can't function, which is the Israeli goal, or they can leave. And it can leave where? Not to their homes inside what is now Israel that were stolen from them, but to other places, which I imagine Trump and Netanyahu are working on now, still trying to bribe enough countries to take the Palestinians of Gaza.
Yeah, that's one of the agenda points is voluntary migration, and it's voluntary in an alternate reality where you have a choice between living in an apocalyptic hellscape where now baby formula is being banned. Baby formula is not being allowed into Gaza, according to just a whole raft of reports. Because why? Well, ever since 1967, every single Israeli prime minister has referred to Palestinian babies, and particularly Palestinian refugee babies, Gaza's 85% refugee, as demographic threats. So they're eliminating the demographic threat. This is about ethno-supremacy, and Donald Trump and Netanyahu are conspiring to advance ethno-supremacist plans, which we'll talk about a little later on. But the nomination for the Nobel Prize is particularly rich, given that this is what Netanyahu and the Israeli army were doing almost at the precise moment when Netanyahu was informing Trump that he was nominating him for the Nobel Prize. They had bombed a school that was a shelter in Borej, which is a refugee camp near Gaza City. And people are being carried out. This is a Holocaust. This is the Gaza Holocaust, and it continues. It's been getting worse and worse for the past 2 weeks. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is reveling in the adulation of Netanyahu because he bombed Iran and rescued Netanyahu from the consequences of the war he started. So it just feels like we live in an alternative reality. And who honestly, who can take any of it seriously except for the MAGA cult, which is feeling the scales lift from its eyes day after day as all the hilarious promises they were granted of exposing the deep state are coming to basically a dead end. What
on that front, it's not even worth getting into because it's so played up enough. But they just had a Russiagate report from the CIA.
Oh yeah, I wanted you to address this.
Well, I think, but like everyone in the Grayzone audience knows Russiagate was a scam. We've done the details a million times. But the point is, even Trump's CIA is covering up for CIA fraud and Russiagate. That's the takeaway from their recent report for accountability for the deep state. Yeah, they went after John Brennan, who was the former director. They faulted him, but they're still covering up for the fundamental fraud of accusing Russia of waging a sweeping interference campaign to brainwash Americans into voting for Trump and not Hillary. Even the CIA under Trump is still covering up for that, which speaks to, as what a scam MAGA has been in terms of the promises to Trump's base.
Yeah. So the CIA of Ratcliffe is not exactly exposing the CIA of Clapper and Brennan. And I was actually told this may have been reported, but the word is that Ratcliffe has been meeting with Clapper and Brennan. Has had meetings with them, kind of helping him learn on the job. I did hear from a Trump source that, the agency is giving Ratcliffe the attaboy and making him feel really important. And they basically control him when the Mossad isn't controlling him. So I'm glad you brought that up. And this isn't just about Trump. Netanyahu's trip to the United States takes place as an international criminal court warrant for his prosecution is out, the U.S. has placed the International Criminal Court and its prosecutor, Karim Khan, under sanctions, stripped him of his visa, stripped his staff of visas, doing everything they can to make it impossible for them to work, neutering the International Criminal Court, demonstrating that it's not really international after all. And the Europeans are playing along. They allowed, as Ali Abunimah points out, Netanyahu to fly directly over their territory instead of arresting him. Emmanuel Macron's France, Giorgia Meloni's Italy, and the prime minister of Greece provided safe passage to international crimes against humanity fugitive Netanyahu through their airspace, more direct complicity with genocide. I mean, look at the flight map. It goes right over Rome. It goes right over Rome, which is where the Rome Statute was signed. The Rome Statute was supposed to prevent everything we see taking place in Gaza. And Rome has fallen. So this is, another insult to the rules-based international order. And there's talks over the Gaza ceasefire, obviously, that are taking place. I want to hear your thoughts on that, Aaron. Hamas continues to submit all of these proposals, and Israel just never accepts any of them because Israel doesn't want the war to end. They want a 60-day pause, and then they want kind of a Lebanon option. While, as we'll talk about later, they're constructing literal concentration camps in Gaza. Hamas wants the war to end. The only leverage they really have left, besides they're actually flexing some military leverage inside Gaza. In Beit Hanun, the Netza Yehuda battalion, which is one of the most blood-stained battalions in the Israeli military, which was almost sanctioned by the Biden administration. Of course, they pulled back, got rocked in Beit Hanun, which is the city right across from Sderot, like northernmost city in Gaza. And the Beit Hanun battalion of the resistance killed 5 Israeli soldiers, wounded 14 seriously. It was a major incident. This is after year after Netanyahu said that Hamas would be completely mopped up. So that there is some leverage there, but the leverage that they have left is 10 hostages. And they're not going to give that up for Israel to just be able to come back in. There's no ceasefire here, and Israel wants to go beyond this and get Trump's permission to continue to violate the ceasefire in Lebanon, where there have been over 4,000 ceasefire violations. Today, Israel waged a drone strike in Lebanon, killing several people, and they want to be able to attack Iran again with U.S. guidance systems, bunker buster guidance systems. So I don't know do you expect, do you think there's any reason to take this seriously, all this talk about a ceasefire?
No. And after Trump and Steve Witkoff played Hamas by getting them to release Adon Alexander by promising an end to the aid blockade, and then, of course, reneging on that pledge, there's no way Hamas will take any more pledges seriously unless there's a permanent end to Israel's assault, which, as you said, Netanyahu doesn't want to do. So no. And my only question now is, with the talk about Lebanon and continued Israeli strikes there, is Israel planning on stealing more territory inside Lebanon now? They've already taken territory in Syria. Do they have their target set on southern Lebanon at this point? I wouldn't, I've heard more talk about that. And just given that's what Israel does, it's founded on stealing Arab land. And there are people in the government that have openly talked about it. I think that's a prospect to take very seriously.
Well, let's bookmark that because we'll talk about Syria later and the delisting of former ISIS and Al-Qaeda leader Jolani. Got a question from River Musics. Max, have you posted somewhere on the dubious involvement of Soros in world affairs. If so, can you share a link or point me in the right direction? Really appreciate it. Go to the grayzone.com and just search Open Societies Foundation, Open Society Foundations, search Soros, but most of our work is on his foundations and how they have been used as a sort of U.S. intelligence cutout, a supplement to USAID to overthrow and destabilize independent and socialist-oriented governments around the world since the end of the Cold War. So yeah, we've definitely done that. And I'm really disappointed I wasn't invited to Alex Soros's wedding. It looked really, really thrilling. I think was Obama there?
I'm sure he was. I'm sure the whole gang was. Now, granted,
Obama's nowhere to be found on any, Trump just shredding the JCPOA and going to war. Obama's nowhere to be found. So
he's too busy producing content for Netflix as part of his deal. He's a busy producer now, because why not? Why not like parlay your presidency into a producing gig for Netflix? That's Obama. It's honestly, he's more passionate probably about content than he is about world affairs, which raises the question about why he bothered to become president in the first place. But
yeah.
Soros on Palestine, by the way, the groups that Soros funds in Palestine, am I fair to say they're actually, that actually some of the things he's funded in Palestine are, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, are halfway decent, that on Palestine his agenda is not actually nefarious? Or am
he's not a real Zionist, and Open Society's actually, I don't know, I think it is nefarious in a way because they don't support the kind of anti-war activity we need. And so when they come in and fund the U.S. campaign for what is called the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, which was this ultra woke Palestine group that at one point was run by Syria regime changers and Jewish Voice for Peace, it feels like they're co-opting it and that they can't talk about empire or regime change or they're going to get cut off. Mm-hmm. So, don't take that. What do you need all that money for? And they're getting money from the Rockefeller Brothers foundations. I mean, that to me doesn't seem like, those groups don't seem like they're serious about anti-war, anti-imperialist activity. And you can't support Palestine without challenging the broader international system of imperial control. So,
yeah, and with siding with Israel elsewhere. Like, so for example, if you support Palestinian rights, but then you side with Israel and Syria, which is trying to which is part of a regime change war as part to undermine the axis that resists Israel, then yeah, you're being contradictory. So, okay, there's my answer.
Good answer. Well, I assume Netanyahu will get what he wants. I called this episode Big Beautiful Bunco just because I needed every word to start with B to play off Big Beautiful Bill. Bunco is now like a dice game for seniors who are suffering from dementia. It's like very good for them to play that game to help keep their minds active, but it's an old school term. It's like an old school slang term for a swindle or a con. And the Big Beautiful Bill is it's one of the biggest swindles. The Trump era is one of the biggest swindles because in the Obama era was kind of a con, but no one voted for Joe Biden and actually thought he was going to expose the deep state or do something anti-establishment. But so many people, including many libertarians, fell for the Trump con and thought that he was actually going to be a pro-peace president, that he wasn't going to actually bomb Iran, that he was going to take on Netanyahu, that he was going to make peace between Russia and Ukraine, and ultimately he's going to expose the deep state, release the JFK files, release the Epstein files. All these promises were made. Corn Pop 82, great name. As someone who voted for Trump 3 times, I thought he was starting to understand when he posted a clip of Jeffrey Sachs criticizing Netanyahu. Take a closer look at that clip. Jeffrey Sachs was slamming Obama, and that's the only part that Trump heard. All he wants to do is attack Obama or Biden, not Netanyahu.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry you voted for Trump 3 times. You've been took, you've been had, you've been bamboozled, corn pop. And, I appreciate your support, though. Appreciate having you here. We are a nonpartisan show. I mean, if you watched us during the Biden era, we hit Biden as hard as anyone. And Aaron, you were like the hero to the MAGA elite, but you were going off on the Russiagate scam from a completely different angle than they were.
Yeah, and I was at least naively expecting them, once they got back in office, to at least have some transparency there and release documents that have been kept from the public and that expose the Russiagate scam, but they haven't. So even on that front, as we talked about earlier, they've just been a complete ruse. It's just all been a complete scam.
Yeah. So Corn Pop was a bad dude, but I'm Corn Pop 82. You're a good dude. I'm not. Don't take it personal. So July 4th rolled around, and America's supposed celebration of independence in Washington was the scene of yet another display of militarism, as we saw on the Army's 250th birthday, with bomber overflights, black helicopter overflights, tanks rolling through the streets of DC. I was there. It was basically just military propaganda wrapped up in a Trump rally. And this was unusual, though, because it wasn't just celebrating the U.S. Army. These were B-2 bomber overflights. Woo! The stealth bomber, which has a different part made in every one of the 50 states, so no member of Congress can vote against funding it because each one of them gets corporate welfare, pork barrel spending. Why are we celebrating the B-2? Like, why that bomber? It's because it bombed Iran. Why did we bomb Iran? Because Netanyahu told us to, or told Trump to, because Miriam Adelson paid Trump to do that very thing. That's why he was elected with her money. That's why she and her late husband, casino baron and Likudnik warlord Sheldon Adelson, were the most frequent visitors to the White House in Trump's first term. So it's a celebration not of American independence, but of Israeli control. It's like a celebration of Zionist occupation and just militarism, which we pay for. Anyone who cheered for that is the biggest dupe. And it's a huge insult as an American. So that's what we were treated to on July 4th. And meanwhile, the big, beautiful bill was passed. I want to talk about this bill. I think it's significant because we're going to see a terrible change. We're going to see a terrible escalation in militarism inside this country, which we'll talk about, and internationally. The bill, as we all know, takes from the poor to give to the rich. Millions will be kicked off Medicare and Medicaid with over $1 billion of cuts to the program in order to fund a massive tax cut, which will mostly benefit the rich. That's obvious. There are also billions of dollars tucked into this bill for the military-industrial complex, as Tom Engelhart and Bill Hartung write at Tom Dispatch, but it was republished by antiwar.com. The Libertarian Mises Institute has a similar analysis. And, here's an excerpt from their piece, which everyone should read. Much of the funding in the bill will flow into the districts of key members of Congress. For example, the Golden Dome Project. This is Trump's attempt to replicate the Israeli Iron Dome that failed in the face of Iranian attacks. We'll send billions of dollars to companies based in Huntsville, Alabama, which calls itself Rocket City because of the dense network of outfits. They are working on both offensive missiles and missile defense systems. And that, of course, is music to the ears of Representative Mike Rogers, the current chair of the House Armed Services Committee, who happens to come from Alabama. He's also, one of the biggest neocons in Congress, one of the biggest supporters of Israel, one of the biggest supporters of the Ukraine proxy war, and you can see why. The Golden Dome Missile Defense Project, on which President Trump has promised to spend $175 billion over the next 3 years, will benefit contractors big and small. Those include companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. I guess they call themselves RTX now because their name has been tainted, that build current generation missile systems, as well as emerging military tech firms like Elon Musk's SpaceX and Palmer Luckey's Anduril. Palmer Luckey is the brother-in-law of Matt Gaetz, by the way. And he's a self-described militant Zionist, both of which are rumored to have a shot at playing a leading role in the development of the new anti-missile system. And what do we need an anti-missile system for? Unless, I don't know, we're escalating against Russia. Oh yeah, Trump is trying to get more arms to Ukraine. There's no peace deal there. So the military budget is now approaching $1 trillion thanks to the big, beautiful bill. The AI warlords who also funded Trump's campaign, Mark Andreessen, Palmer Luckey, Elon Musk, they're getting a massive tax cut. But even Elon Musk is calling out the bill for raising the national debt to $3 trillion. So any libertarian, I mean, if you're against the Fed, you're against debt, the endless printing of money, and you voted for Trump. I mean, what did you think he was going to do? The only thing where I think he didn't signal what he was going to do here and scammed people was there were many times when he said he would not cut Medicare. His base doesn't want their Medicare cut. But this is about militarism. It's about basing our entire economy around the military. And a lot of people are duped about what's happening with ICE. They think ICE is like the ultimate agenda here is some mass deportation plan that's going to somehow benefit the American working class. There's going to be some new Operation Wetback like under Eisenhower, and then Americans are going to get good paying jobs to replace the quote unquote illegals. And this is really more about normalizing a secret police in America, normalizing something that I thought the right was against, which is black helicopters and federal agents storming through American cities and small towns. And that's what we're seeing across the country. I mean, this was at Home Depot in Cypress Park, LA, near where I lived here for 5 years. Never saw anything like this. Although there's like constant police presence of sheriffs and LAPD. This is a military style raid. These guys are carrying field latrines. They have scopes. They brought out the big guns, and they showed up in a unmarked series of white vans in a Home Depot parking lot. And check the local media. Check like the Boyle Heights local media. They detained one taco vendor. That's what they were there to do. They literally detained one taco vendor. MacArthur Park. Just, I guess this was yesterday, or this was July 7th. Another military style show of force inside the U.S. This is what it looked like. Federal troops on horseback, federal troops storming through, helicopters overhead, black helicopters in American cities, and they're not even arresting anyone. They're not going after some giant business that employs tons of undocumented migrants. They're just storming through a park where you do see a lot of migrants. And the MAGA defense of this is, drug users hang out in the park. Well, then why not send the cops in? This is a federal military raid. And it's just simply about normalizing, using troops, getting rid of posse comitatus, shredding the Constitution, and using federal agents against the U.S. while our money goes to AI warlords and the big five in the military industrial complex. Only 6% of the budget in the big, beautiful bill for the military will even go to soldiers or paying for their needs abroad or equipping soldiers. It's just corporate welfare. And so too is the ICE budget, tens and tens of billions of dollars for ICE, supposedly for mass deportations. As Trump talks about some kind of amnesty for restaurant workers and people working, undocumented migrants working in slaughterhouses, that's more corporate welfare. It's not about like saving the working class. It's about giving billions of dollars to private prisons like Geo Group. What is Geo Group? I mean, it's the biggest private prison contractor in the US. They got $1 billion deal from the Trump administration over the course of the next 15 years back in February. Now there's tens of billions more for them in the BBB. This is the announcement. 15-year contract to build 1,000 bed Delaney Hall facility in New Jersey. Who was the key lobbyist for the Geo Group for years? It's the current Attorney General, Pam Bondi. I mean, these are all just corporate kickbacks. And, you know, we, the American citizen, will pay the price. I don't want troops in my city. Does anyone want troops in their hometown? That's what this is about.
It's just
The military parade was about.
It's just, and so Trump's base are the kind of people who like train in groups, like with their firearms for hypothetical raids by the government against them, right? That's the big appeal of like having gun rights, like to have a militia to protect yourself against government tyranny. But yet Trump then turns around and, you know, 6 armed forces on U.S. citizens, except they happen to be in big cities. So Trump supporters are not supposed to care because everybody in cities are, you know, are demonized as being just undocumented migrants and
they can show up. They can show up any way they want. They can show up without military gear on, in plain clothes, without ID. And if you get in their way, they can arrest you too. We're seeing so much footage of American citizens being arrested.
Yeah, as they did with people like Mahmoud Khalil, who's not a U.S. citizen, but who's here on a green card, and others. And on the military spending, I mean, Trump, I believe, is the first president since Eisenhower to use the term military-industrial complex. Like he, in his first term and also in his second term too, he's talked about the military-industrial complex. He criticized it. He said, like, they're out to make money. What does he go ahead and do? He goes and enriches them and brags about it. They didn't get to $1 trillion, right, in this bill, but it came pretty close to $1 trillion Pentagon budget. And they're proud of that. And this golden dome, it's basically the Ronald Reagan fantasy about Star Wars. It's completely useless. There's no military justification for it. It's all just to recycle tax dollars into the military-industrial complex. And no outrage at all from his base. Absolutely nothing. I mean,
no, they support it. And I mean, they've kept the country in a constant state of emergency in order to justify this gigantic grift, this gigantic theft. I mean, before this, it was the state of emergency invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, as if the country was at war. Then cooking intelligence on Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, operating a gang inside the United States, Tren de Aragua, to justify Stephen Miller, arch-Zionist, nativist, who's devised this whole agenda to justify his agenda. It's and mark my words, at the end of the Trump era, come back to this. At the end of the Trump era, there will have been no gigantic deportation that removed all the undocumented migrants and all the Latinos that you want to see, that MAGA wants to see gone. It won't have happened. Numerous productive members of society will have been removed, and we, the American taxpayer, will have paid billions and billions of dollars to giant corporations run by Trump donors and former Trump and which are paying Trump cabinet members to do it. And the working class will be no better off. That's what this is about. The entire Trump era and the Trump brand is just about conning a section of the American public into allowing Trump to do what Biden did and Trump before him, running our pockets to loot the treasury and hand it over to rich donors. That's what was done with Operation Warp Speed. It's what was done with the Afghanistan war. It's what was done with the Ukraine proxy war. And that's what the Trump administration is doing. It's what Trump went to do in the Gulf states, is to go get as much money as he can collect. There was no real geopolitical agenda there except enriching his family. And, I was watching Steve Bannon's show, The War Room, because, he had some great commentary on Trump betraying his base to bomb Iran. But if you watch the whole show, like the rest of the show is just ads for products that benefit the Trump family. Trump's other son came on at one point and started hawking Trump golden cell phones. I mean, what do you think is going on? When is everyone going to wake up? You're just a bunch of, and stop being a bunch of dupes. Well, there's, the one thing that I thought could finally wake them up has happened, which is that the Trump administration has announced there will be no prosecutions over the Jeffrey Epstein saga, and there will be no Epstein files released.
He did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the set?
Yeah, sure. If
Pam, could I just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
He did work for.
All right. Let's not talk about it anymore. For whatever reason, Trump's base wants to talk about it.
Well, yeah, that's because Trump's influencers, including, his deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, I think Kash Patel did too. They talked about Epstein constantly. Yep. They painted it as like a Democratic Party elite plot that was being covered up. And then once Trump was elected, it was all going to come out. So they whipped up their own followers into a frenzy. And now that they're in power, Trump says, there's nothing to see here. Let's move on. Who wants to talk about it?
Yeah. Here's Dan Bongino, now deputy director of the FBI.
Huge story. Again, not a lot of people are talking about. There is a little current of information I'm getting that the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi may be finally releasing a lot of information on this Jeffrey Epstein case, which is a huge deal. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'm hoping it does. I've been covering it for a long time. The Jeffrey Epstein case, you do not know all the details of this thing, I promise. There are a lot of really obviously powerful people. This part, but the specific names we may not, including, I believe, the Clintons, based on information I discussed yesterday, who are knee-deep in involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, and no one can figure out what the level of entanglement is. Jeffrey Epstein met with Obama's fixer, his lawyer, Catherine Rumler, who was always the one in the middle of these Obama scandals, and we can't figure out what they're hiding. Here's Marsha Blackburn, who has been all over this. She's a senator from Tennessee, Republican, obviously. And she's like, hey, man, is it time now? It's time to start overturning that rock and seeing what's underneath it.
All right, we get the point. This is was day after day from Dan Bongino and so many other astroturfed right-wing AM radio hosts that there was going to be some imminent, gigantic, powerful drop of Epstein files and prosecutions, and Trump was going to finally root out the deep state. How could anyone be dumb enough to believe that Trump was going to do that? I mean, it would have been one thing if it was, someone who hadn't had this long association with Jeffrey Epstein, but it was well known that Donald Trump was someone very closely acquainted to Jeffrey Epstein, who said on the record, Jeffrey Epstein likes young girls, and I think he's a wonderful, fantastic guy. What did Trump actually say? You don't have to parse the words. He pretty much said he wasn't going to do anything with any so-called Epstein files. And he said, why?
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would. All right, I guess I would. I think that less so because, you know, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
Would you declassify?
Let's watch
the
that one
Epstein
more
files?
time.
Yeah, I would. All right, I guess I would. I think that less so because, you know, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
So, I mean, he's calling it phony stuff. He's worried about ruining lives. And I don't know. I mean, whose life could it possibly ruin but his own?
Shows Trump giving Epstein his personal attention. A tape in the NBC archives of a Mar-a-Lago party shows Trump giving Epstein his personal attention. The footage, shot in November of 1992, before Trump opened the resort as a club, shows the future president surrounded by cheerleaders for the Buffalo Bills and Miami Dolphins, capturing Trump's fun-loving bachelor lifestyle for an appearance on Faith Daniels' NBC talk show.
We're going to get great ratings in your show.
Trump is surrounded by women as music blares in the background. After a while, Trump goes to greet 3 new guests, among them the financier Jeffrey Epstein, more than a decade before his guilty plea on state prostitution charges. Later in the footage, Trump is seen talking to Epstein and another man as women are dancing in front of them. Trump alternates between dancing and pointing out women to Epstein and the other man and telling Epstein about the cameras. Though exactly what they say is difficult to understand as they discuss the women and their appearances, Trump gestures to one and appears to say to Epstein, "Look at her back there. She's hot." And then Trump says something else into Epstein's ear that makes him double over with laughter. But as the president says now, he never liked Epstein.
I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his.
Jeffrey Epstein had some interesting things to say about Trump to the reporter Michael Wolff. But I mean, why would anyone think Trump was going to release the Epstein? If there is some secret black book and there's new information to be rooted out about this network of pedophile elites, why would anyone think Trump would be the one to do it? I mean, he'd be the least likely to do it unless like Bill Clinton could run again.
I think that's the key point. I'm not convinced how much material there actually is. I suspect a lot of this was just like Trump influencers like Jan Bongino giving bait to their audience. Because look, if there was evidence,
they know their audience is that dumb.
Well, but I mean, if there was evidence like this, I just don't think it would be allowed to exist. I don't think you have files this damning that ought to sit there for that long. I just think if there's this level of corruption and these crimes, and that evidence gets destroyed by whoever is in on it, which I think so. Not saying there wasn't ever evidence about Epstein and everything he was doing, but I just think if it existed, it would have been destroyed a long time ago. And speaking of destroyed evidence, I mean, there's still the controversy over the suicide footage, like the footage from his prison the night he died or allegedly died, which was edited, which is a common thing that happens in cases. Like I met with Israel and the soccer hooligans in Amsterdam. Damning footage there also was erased too, right? So like something that happens in these cases.
Well, I mean, the real and I'm not making any comment on Epstein or the Epstein files because I'm not going to claim complete expertise on them. But there's just this real blackmail bribery network run by a foreign intelligence agency hiding in plain sight called AIPAC. And it has control of Congress, has control of so many institutions, has control of the Trump administration. Maybe it's a factor here. There is plentiful evidence that Trump was asked about today about Epstein having been involved with a foreign intelligence network like the Mossad. He had a Saudi ID card found in his residence, which looked to have been forged. This came out through prosecutor Alex Acosta, and there may be more to learn there. but it's the funniest thing to see Trump supporters. I mean, this is funny on its own. Trump supporters blame Kash Patel's girlfriend for burying the whole. I'm seeing this everywhere. They're blaming Kash Patel's girlfriend for the whole Epstein cover up because I didn't know she was Jewish. She's a Jewish country singer.
Might not be Jewish. I mean, like this is easily how this stuff spread. I mean, who knows?
She seems pretty goyish to me.
Yeah,
I don't know,
I
but
mean,
she has done stuff for PragerU.
Okay.
And it is true that PragerU is co-directed by a veteran of Unit 8200 in the Israeli Cyber Warfare Division.
Okay.
That's all true. And PragerU, under the watch of like Ron DeSantis and various Trump allies, is being implanted in the minds of impressionable youth through primary school curricula. But blaming Kash Patel for basically following orders and being a good soldier on this is a little bit of a stretch. I mean, people will blame everyone but Trump himself. And I mean, what you got with the BBB and what you got with bombing Iran is you got a guy who looks and seems like so out of place in American retail politics, doing the same thing John McCain and Paul Ryan would have done. You basically have orange Paul Ryan and orange John McCain. And now this Epstein saga has sort of crystallized it for Trump supporters that maybe they're not being told the truth. And it'll take a generation to recover from this, but there will be no recovery because every American government, like every federal government's job now, as global capitalism collapses, is to take as much as they can for us to give to the rich. I mean, in many ways, that's what the big, beautiful, not the big, beautiful bill, BBB, but the other BBB, Build Back Better was. Build Back Better was like the slogan of the World Economic Forum in Davos that became the slogan of the Biden economic plan, the slogan of, I think, the Boris Johnson economic plan, the slogan of so many like Western governments' economic plan. And where has it gotten us? So the Trump administration just seems to be no different except in their acceleration of the militarization of everyday life. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add here before we move on.
Listen, I don't want to just, I think what Trump is doing domestically is far worse than what Biden did. I think there were some positive aspects of Biden's domestic policy. Like they invested in domestic manufacturing. They did lower the cost of some pharmaceuticals, like a small number, but still some. Like what Trump is doing to me is just the ultra extreme subservience to the ultra wealthy, as opposed to Biden's subservience. Like I think Trump's taken it to a new level, but I don't want to overlook the differences. Like Biden wasn't cutting Medicaid at this level that Trump was, while Trump was, and what the Republicans are doing, like they're going out there and openly saying that like they're only taking Medicaid away from people who are like sitting in their mom's basement playing video games. They're insulting their own constituency, their own base, because a lot of Trump people are on Medicaid. And so I think they're simply taking the obedience to the ultra wealthy to a new level. But I don't want to slight the aspects of Biden's policy that I think were positive, or at least not as harmful.
Well, that's what you get, like, that's what you get with the Democrats is like, they're like the smart evil party. The Republicans are the stupid evil party. I don't think Trump might actually would pay for this if the Democrats weren't so discredited among their own base. I mean, they have like a 20% approval rating. Chuck Schumer, I should have prepared some material on this, but we'll do an article about it this week. Chuck Schumer is the Democratic minority leader in the Senate, is heading to Sun Valley, Idaho this week to meet with Hollywood elites and big tech elites, including Alex Karp from Palantir, in a secret semi-secret off the record retreat. Bezos will be there. Casey Wasserman from all the studio heads will be there. And they're basically all conspiring to determine who will be, the next Democratic, and I wouldn't say conspiring, but they're discussing one of the agenda items is who will the Democrats put forward as their next candidate. And so they're bringing out Wes Moore, who they're grooming as the next Obama, who's the governor of Maryland. But this is how it works. And this is why the Democratic base hates them. And there's a bunch of mainstream hack reporters who are being invited as well. Let me actually pull this up because this is pretty fascinating and no one knows this. This is called Allen and Co. And it's sort of like it's almost like a, if I can get this tab on here, it's like a Bilderberg type meeting in Sun Valley, Idaho. This is the Observer, which is a newspaper that's owned by Jared Kushner. So you can see the guest list. Barry Diller, Michael Eisner from Disney is going to be there. Bob Iger from Disney. Rupert Murdoch and his son, Lachlan, who fired Tucker Carlson at the behest of Vladimir Zelensky. And on and on and on. Jeffrey Katzenberg, former funder of the Young Turks. News media. Well, Bloomberg, who is maybe still the richest man in America, owns Bloomberg. Anderson Cooper, Andrew Ross Sorkin, Aaron Burnett, and Barry Weiss. That kind of stands out. Like, how did Barry Weiss get in there? She's like part of the 0.1% hovercraft Davos elite, but she kind of caters to a center-right crowd, and she basically represents Israel above all else. And so then politics, it's pretty interesting that Wes Moore, someone most of you watching have never heard of, is going to be there. This means that you're going to be hearing more about him. Glenn Youngkin, he's the token Republican who's the governor of Virginia. Glenn Youngkin comes from the Carlyle Group. The Carlyle Group was basically set up in the 80s as one of the first consulting firms to bring people out of the defense and intelligence world into corporate America and make money. And then Schumer, that's the leader of the Democratic Party. So the Democrats could actually harm Trump on the Medicare cuts. I think they could have harmed him on Epstein. I think they should have done Trump Epstein instead of Trump Russia, that hoax, because Trump Epstein is real. The problem is Trump would have said, well, there's Bill Clinton Epstein. There's all these other figures in Epstein. So the Democrats can't do it. That would have hurt Trump much more. But the Medicare cuts are going to hurt him. But then you look at the Democrats and it's like, that's what they are. And their base is like just completely done with the whole thing, at least everyone under 45. They're certainly, the new Quinnipiac poll shows that close to 60% of all Democrats favor Palestine over Israel.
And that they want new leadership. The
Yeah.
majority of Democratic voters don't like the Democratic Party leadership. And how can you when it's led by Chuck Schumer, arch Israel supporter, servant of Wall Street, and then Hakeem Jeffries, who just offers more of the same. He has the same policies as Chuck Schumer, and none of them are willing to so far endorse their own Democratic nominee for mayor in the country's biggest city, New York, Mamdani, because he's an actual progressive who supports Palestinian rights. So they're in trouble. They're in trouble right now, and that is that's the one aspect of domestic politics you can look at and say, all right, like maybe there's some possibility here, because the Democratic Party scam, the elite scam, is up, and the base is tired of it. And apparently they've learned nothing from losing to Trump for a second time, especially because of their refusal to distance themselves from Israel. Kamala Harris refused to do. She wouldn't distance herself from Israel or from Biden, who bear hugged Israel. And so that dynamic, especially with Zohran Mamdani, surging in New York City and having a good chance of winning, unless the elites put a stop to it. That's an interesting story.
Because young progressives, urban progressives who constitute a big part of the Democratic Party base, see Palestine now as something symbolic of a candidate's principles and ethics and whether they will actually stand up on principle, because it's one of the hardest things to stand up on in this country, because you're going up against Zionist power, which is hegemonic across the transatlantic axis. And so I think it goes beyond Palestine for Mamdani. And it's I think one of the best ways for a candidate to virtue signal in a big city in the US. The problem is it's hard for them to raise money unless they have lots of small donors, as Bernie Sanders did, and do that. But he pulled it off. So I think this relates to the next part, the next segment I want to cover. It relates very well because the two-party system is becoming discredited. Even like younger MAGA supporters are starting to see it for the first time, maybe. I gave up on this a while ago. I didn't vote for either the Democrat or the Republican. I don't know how anyone who's politically educated could do that. But this is happening all across the West. The whole system of liberal democracy is being unmasked as kind of a farce, as our lack of freedoms is exposed. And October 7th has really accelerated this process. And we can see the hypocrisy in music festivals. I mean, this is the summer of music festivals in Europe. One of the big ones is Glastonbury. It's live streamed by the BBC. As I showed when I was in Iran, showing like a broadcast of BBC Persia, which is a very sophisticated regime change tool, these music festivals actually get broadcast by BBC globally, and they're kind of like a soft power weapon. So that's one reason why they don't want a band like Kneecap on stage, the Irish band, which spoke for a generation when it said F Israel at Coachella. So they were banned. Then Bob Vylan, who is a UK-based rapper, steps up during the live stream and leads a chant. No one knew this chant was coming, but everybody, like so much of the crowd, just reflexively, instinctively started chanting along because they felt it. Death to the IDF, calling for the destruction. That'll probably lead to us being demonetized just because I said it. Calling for the dissolution, the abolition of the Israeli genocidal military, the same way the South African Defense Forces was dissolved after apartheid South Africa was abolished. And this has led to one of the biggest global controversies that has exposed the massive gulf between the elite who control transatlantic, supposedly liberal democratic governments and the general public. Because Bob Vylan has been fired by United Talent Agency, which is just run by a collection of open Zionists, just as Susan Sarandon was let go. And his visa was pulled by the Trump administration immediately. The same Trump administration that welcomed Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Jewish supremacist terrorist, someone who is actually convicted of terrorism in an Israeli court and is now a cabinet member in Netanyahu's government, allowed him to come to New York and go on a speaking tour. Bob Dylan's card got pulled, his visa got pulled, can't enter the US and have a US tour. I think his UK tour has been canceled. And now the heads are rolling at the BBC. BBC music boss steps down after Bob Vylan Glastonbury controversy. The performance was deemed high risk by the broadcaster, but was live streamed anyway. Lorna Clark, who's the BBC's director of music, was reported by the Times as stepping back from her day-to-day responsibilities following the backlash to live streaming Bob Vylan's performance. The BBC apologized to viewers and admitted that it had deemed the set high risk in advance, but then deemed it suitable for live streaming. So they're basically alleging maybe that there's some kind of conspiracy on the inside at the BBC to allow British people to see this horrible chant, which really upset the Daily Mail, the Israel lobby in the UK, and the British politicians it controls. It didn't seem to upset the British public. And now like BBC executives are going down. Radar Fest, another music festival that's coming up in the UK, the Radar Festival that took place, had to cancel Bob Vylan against the wishes of the festival organizer, Catherine Jackson Smith. I cannot express clearly enough that I wanted Bob Vylan to perform at our festival. She calls it horrific that she was forced to cancel. It's not your festival, apparently. It's not your festival. It's Israel's festival. You're not allowed to have Bob Vylan perform. Don't you know?
And the way she tells the story, it wasn't even clear to her who specifically were the forces behind the cancellation that she just had to obey. It was like a voice from on high, where that's what happens in the corporate world. You just get told from above, and to her it wasn't even clear who, but it was someone powerful who had the ability to basically destroy the festival, that Bob Vylan wasn't welcome. And for the festival to go forward, they had to comply.
Yeah. I don't know if our live stream has been pulled yet, but I was just reporting on what was said on stage, and I said deaf, that the IDF should go deaf, just so they can't hear their own bombs. Just to clarify. But you make a great point. I mean, who was behind Radar being forced to cancel someone who is increasingly popular that they wanted to host? According to our colleague Wyatt Reed, Radar Festival was coerced into canceling Bob Vylan in private talks with, quote, the venue, its co-owners, AMG and Live Nation, and local authorities. They were given an ultimatum: cancel the band's appearance or the entire festival would be shut down on its biggest day. So the entire festival was going to go down for Israel, for the Israel's genocide machine, for the military that has been slaughtering children, shredding them day after day on camera, forcing people to see the most horrible images they've ever seen, destroying families in Gaza, committing ethnic cleansing. A music festival has to be canceled because someone spoke out against it. The only answer is to speak out more, to escalate, and to recognize that these music festivals are just corporate propaganda, just like our political parties. I mean, if they can't control their own guest list.
Well, it reminds me of what happened to us at Web Summit a few years ago, that big tech conference we got invited to. And the surprise guest was the First Lady of Ukraine, Zelensky's wife. And once she found out we were speaking, she told the organizers that if we were allowed to speak, that the festival would be shut down, that she'd get all the advertisers to pull out. And they complied. I mean, that's what these powerful forces can do. They can leverage the power of advertisers, corporations that really control everything, to shut down the free speech that they don't want. And it's no different here.
Yeah, it's no different here. It's just that it's a music festival. So it's more illustrative of how culture is controlled and how culture is used to project soft power of a discredited elite. Whereas our festival, Web Summit, that we were supposed to speak at the invitation of the founder of Web Summit, who was eventually removed, Paddy Cosgrave, he had to step down because he said Israel was committing war crimes in Gaza. Simply for that reason. Web Summit relies on the AI warlords who are making genocide possible. It's just a trade festival or trade summit for the big tech and AI industry. So I wasn't surprised that we were canceled.
I'd forgotten about that. So the founder of this whole thing, this major, tech conference, on top of the fact he gets pressure to cancel us, he has to cancel himself because he made a very I think just obvious statement. It wasn't, there was nothing like incendiary about it, that Israel was committing war crimes and all war crimes should be treated equally. I think that's what he said. All war crimes should be treated equally. Because of that, he had to go from his own organization, his own conference.
Well, the one thing we have is we have the Grayzone, and thanks to all of you watching, we can never, as long as we're physically here, we will never go away. We'll never stop doing what we're doing because there's no boss to drop us. That's why I started the Grayzone. It's kind of like owning your own record label, because Alternet collapsed, we probably would have been kicked out anyway at that point. I mean, I was just there. The Grayzone wasn't even like a real thing, but I was there, and it was like the last gasp of that whole progressive media world that started at the during the Bush era, and that just became like a joke, supporting the Russiagate hoax and becoming like a tentacle of the Democratic Party as it was overtaken again by the neocons. So I started the Grayzone, and here we are. We have 10,000 people watching concurrently right now, and we can't be. I don't think we can be stopped. And there are so many other alternative and independent media outlets that are lifting the mask right now, and people are waking up in ways they haven't before. And the one thing that couldn't be taken away from Bob Villain, aside from his integrity, is the fact that he too owns his own label. And so what he did at Glastonbury, had you heard of Bob Villain before?
No, but I'm not really up on contemporary music. So, I mean, I'm not a good gauge of, but no, I've not heard of him. No.
I'm not up on contemporary music either because I'm not a masochist. But there's some all right stuff out there. But yeah, I'd never heard of him before. He owns his own label, and he's on the UK charts. They can't stop him. His downloads are surging on every platform, every streaming platform that he's allowed to still be on. And it's because the people feel what he's saying. And the people want the IDF to go deaf. So he said it right here, you can't get dropped if you own the label. By the way, Bob Villain is kind of like a duo. So that's like, this is the wave of the future. More and more artists, because art fundamentally is about being transgressive, at least in the modern era. And you're not going to captivate youth unless you're being subversive, you're challenging power. This is just like it's a more political version of Ed Sullivan telling Jim Morrison that he could not go on his late night show and say, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher." And so he was told to say, "Girl, we couldn't get much better," but he did it anyway, and it helped make the Doors famous. I mean, that we're dealing not just with like a Zionist regime that hates us, that will censor us and destroy our Constitution and any veneer of liberal democracy in order to get its way and censor and criminalize us. We're dealing with squares. And one of the funny things is Bob Dylan was, after suffering a traumatic head injury after driving his motorcycle into a wall, and then slipping into a period of kind of narcissism, giving, no longer having any connection to the civil rights movement or politics. He converted to Christianity, and then he got into Israel, and he was for a short period a supporter of Meir Kahane. A lot of people don't know this. And he did a song called Neighborhood Bully, which was a tribute to Israel, basically painting Israel as a victim of all of the of unfair allegations for defending itself.
Wow.
But yeah.
Leonard Cohen did something similar too, although not as bad, but Leonard Cohen also, I think he played for Israeli troops or did something pro-Israel.
Yeah, he played a show in Israel and got a lot of pushback for that.
Yeah.
He was like by that point, he was a Buddhist. But Bob Dylan, I mean, what is he? He's not remembered for that period. Bob Dylan in the 80s, it was just like his performances. I saw him perform. It was horrible. And then he had kind of a renaissance in the late 90s, Time Out of Mind, and sort of woke up a little bit, but I never knew what he was saying. But the Bob Dylan that we all know was sort of like this political icon of the 60s. What was the feature film from 2024 about Bob Dylan? I forgot what it's called, but I actually watched it.
Yeah.
Starring some method actor who really captures him. He looks like if Bob Dylan had a personal trainer. That's like what he looks like. And it was actually not bad. It was not bad. And you see the genesis of a lot of the most famous Bob Dylan songs, but the most famous Bob Dylan political anthem is Masters of War. And I mean, do you know that song? Yeah, of course.
Of course. It
The
is.
song was not, I mean, the closing lyrics are very similar to what Bob Villain said at Glastonbury, but they're considered uncontroversial today. And I think they're relevant. Let me ask you one question. Is your money that good? Or should I say it like Dylan?
Sure.
Will it buy you forgiveness? Do you think that it could? I think that you will find when your death takes its toll, all the money you made will never buy back your soul. And I hope you die and your death will come soon. I'll follow your casket by the pale afternoon. Do, 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 do. And I'll watch while you're lowered down to your deathbed. And I'll stand over your grave till I'm sure that you're dead. That could be addressed to the IDF. So should we ban Bob Dylan now from playing that? I mean, it's about the masters of war. It's about Dick Cheney. It's about Joe Biden. It's about Tony Blinken. It's about Trump. It's about Netanyahu. It's about the IDF. It's about the masters of war. It's one of the best anti-war songs ever. And it's calling for the masters of war to die and us to celebrate because they've killed so many people. So ban Bob Dylan and Bob Villain, at least the old cool Bob Dylan, like when he wore like the mod sunglasses and, you know, all right.
Well, listen, I hadn't parsed the lyrics that closely, so thanks for bringing that. And also thank you for that impression. That was impressive. Honestly, you should add that to your roster. That's very convincing.
Well, I tried to do Dylan when he did We Are the World. Remember my We Are the World? And you didn't seem to like that. You were like trying to like rush me through that.
I don't remember that, but certainly this version of Dylan is commendable. And the song is what? It's from the Vietnam era, right? I assume it's written about Vietnam.
It's from like 1966, I think. Let me check that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when like the U.S. was just I think it's 1963. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't really well known by most Americans that the U.S. was entering Vietnam with trainers under JFK. So it was way ahead of its time, but you know, it holds true today. And Bob Dylan wished death upon the masters of war. A lot of people didn't appreciate my singing in the chat. That was me channeling Dylan. Mm-mm. So now there's a Springsteen movie coming out that's like got some method actor, and it's going to be try to capture Springsteen, who remains political. He's just a tool of the Democratic Party now. He like performs at any Democratic fundraiser, and he sings about Tom Joad. He sings like Woody Guthrie songs for rich Democrats. That's where we're at. And he has dinner with Steven Spielberg and Obama.
They had a podcast together, Obama and Springsteen.
They did. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to do a Springsteen impersonation. I did one though of him doing We Are the World, which is like one of the, whatever. All right, moving along. Oh, you know this guy, David Dryman from Disturbed, the band Disturbed?
Oh, yes.
This guy always trolled me for years. He was the lead singer for the band Disturbed. And like, if you search his Twitter account and mine, he'll be like, Max Blumenthal is a capo. Max, you hate Jews. And I would call him, I repeatedly called him a wash up, and he would always tweet back at me within seconds some image of his show in Tel Aviv showing lots of people in the crowd, proving he's not washed up. This is what David Dryman did in Israel. He pulled the Nikki Haley, and he's writing F Hamas on a 100, it looks like on an Israeli tank shell. one of the tank shells that have slammed into homes in Gaza. I would find these in homes all around Gaza, these tank shells, and there'd be holes in the walls. This is it's right next to a 155 millimeter howitzer. All right. No one's removing David Dryman's, no talent agencies cutting David Dryman. He's not even talented. He's not facing any problems. I mean, that perfectly illustrates the hypocrisy. But the people know what's up. The people know Black Sabbath played for the last time at a music festival. I think it was in Manchester because that's where they're from. And was it Manchester or Birmingham? Pretty sure it's Manchester. And David Dryman was brought on stage. I mean, a lot of performers participated in Black Sabbath's curtain call. And one of them was David Dryman. And here's what happened. And he said, "You want to start this now?" So the people know. I mean, people are so aware that even at a Black Sabbath, kind of a nostalgia rock festival, gales of boos erupt from the crowd when David Dryman appears because people are against the genocide that he celebrated in Israel. They're against his Zionism, but he faces no consequence for it professionally.
In case we have any diehard Black Sabbath fans, we just want to be accurate. So it was Birmingham, not
Birmingham. Yeah.
People care. Some people care about that stuff a lot. So yeah, but I'd never heard of him before, except in the context of him signing those bombs. And so that is a welcome sight to see, him being booed by a huge crowd. I mean, and that's a band, Black Sabbath also has another famous anti-war song, War Pigs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the,
Yeah.
actually, I think Geezer Butler wrote that song, and he was interviewed about it. And he said, we were trying to capture the Dylan from his political era because rock and, pop stopped being political. And we were trying to channel the old Dylan, and they felt abandoned by Dylan. So War Pigs came out of, it was inspired by Masters of War. And, how David Dryman is a war pig. But that whole album, the whole second Black Sabbath album is anti-war. Electric Funeral is about the post-apocalyptic hellscape. I mean, just put that track on and watch footage of Gaza. So it's still very relevant to today. And yeah, sorry I got it wrong and said Manchester. I am a Black Sabbath fan. Tommy Iommi, cool story. He lost his fingertips in a meat factory, I think, in Birmingham, and he has like plastic fingertips, which lends to his unique style. Let me see if I got that right. Yeah, Tommy. One of the first Google searches for Tommy Iommi is fingers.
And he plays what, like guitar?
Yeah, he lost the tips of his middle and ring fingers on his right hand in an industrial accident at the age of 17. I mean, you think about the backgrounds these characters came from compared to like today's pop stars, who are like their whole lives are being groomed to be on some like reality show.
The drummer for Def Leppard also only has one arm. I remember that.
I forgot about that.
I mean, the impressive people out there.
Yeah. I guess he played a double bass drum. So, on the theme of the UK being completely authoritarian and controlled by a Zionist regime, Palestine Action, an anti-war group, which has killed no one and physically, as far as I know, they physically harmed no one, was proscribed by Prime Minister Keir Starmer's administration as a terrorist group. Now, let's just say you support law and order and you are a British Tory and you don't like Palestine and you don't like the fact that these young people are running up and destroying public property, even though that property happens to be warplanes that are being used to support a genocide, or factories from a foreign apartheid state's state-owned weapons firm, Elbit. Let's just say you're one of these law and order people. Why can't British law that's already on the books cover what they do? Apparently, it wasn't enough. And obviously, the Israeli government was demanding a terrorism prescription, a terrorism listing, which is what Starmer proceeded to do. Basically, one of the biggest abuses of terrorism law. And now, anyone who protests in support of Palestine action, correct me if I'm wrong, if they declare public support for Palestine action, they can be accused under British law, under various new British laws, of supporting a terrorist organization and hauled off to jail, as this 83-year-old priest was in Parliament Square.
Why are you here today? I'm here to stand up for the people of Palestine.
This is a terrorist, according to the Keir Starmer administration.
You did. We are losing our civil liberties. You make us proud, auntie.
We are losing our
Look
civil
after yourself.
liberties, she said.
You are a hero. You, not so much.
Oh, they're leading her off. Numerous protesters were arrested for declaring their support for Palestine action for speech crimes. I guess that would be First Amendment protected activity in the US, but they don't have a First Amendment in the UK. They have a National Security Act, which forbids it. Free the 83-year-old priest. 29 people in total were arrested at that protest simply for stating their support for Palestine action. And now my hard drive is about to be assaulted by the UK Independent. The designation as a terror group means that membership of or support for Palestine action is a criminal offense punishable by jail. Here's another person being hauled off. Are you free? Or do you feel safe yet? I don't know if there's much to add there, except that Roger Waters is now being accused of supporting terrorism by Zionists in the UK because he has issued a public call to support Palestine action and has called this our Spartacus moment. As Roger Waters announces support for Palestine action, Israel lobby groups are calling for the prosecution of Waters over his stance. I mean, it's just cartoonish levels of censorship and criminalization taking place in the UK. In Germany as well. I mean, take a look at any protest against the genocide in Germany, and you're going to see people being violently hauled off simply for unfurling signs of protest. So the Western liberal democratic order is being discredited before our eyes. Aaron, you spoke in the UK twice in the last year. Am I right?
Yeah. I haven't. One more anecdote about Palestine action. Zara Sultana, who's a member of parliament in the UK, who just announced she's leaving Labour Party to join Jeremy Corbyn and going independent. She gave a speech last week where she said in her speech in Parliament, "We are all Palestine action." And the official record, like official parliamentary record, it censored action from her saying we are all Palestine action. So it just says we are all Palestine. They took out action because I guess now you can't even say the name Palestine action inside the UK Parliament. And this, as you said, is our new reality. And so, when I've spoken in the UK, I didn't have any problems. But did
you take precautions, or were you concerned that you could face backlash for your speech?
Well, I mean, my main concern was just, based on what happened to Richard Medhurst, where he went, and we've talked about this, and we talked to him about this, where he basically was investigated for terrorism because of his journalism. And our colleague Kate Larenberg has faced questioning as well and faced harassment as well. So yeah, I mean, I was concerned going in, but ultimately nothing happened to me. But this is the new reality now, where people who support Palestine have to now grapple with persecution, being arrested, and not being allowed to organize their activity, like their activism, because it goes against the holy state of Israel.
Well, the next time I want to get out of jury duty, I'll make sure to wear a Palestine Action shirt. And the next time I want to get kicked out of the UK, I'll just say I support Palestine Action. Seems pretty easy. What everyone needs to do today, if they care about the genocide, is to say the unsayable. That's all that needs to be done to protest. I mean, they're kind of making it easy for us to discredit them by just arresting people for unfurling protest signs. And at the same time, the hypocrisy. I mean, whether it's David Dreiman signing bombs, signing tank shells for the Israeli soldiers, and then being invited to a major music festival, while Bob Vylan and Dropkick are banned from festivals, banned from the United States. There's also this from British Foreign Minister David Lammy, which I think crystallizes the hypocrisy in a different way. Because remember, this is about terrorism. This is about how terrorism law is applied, and what terrorism means, and what we were told it meant after 9/11, and why we were told that our military had to go into the Middle East and throw some country up against the wall and smash it up. It was terrorism. David Lammy is meeting with the former deputy head of ISIS, the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra, Mohammed al-Jolani, whose real name is Ahmed al-Shara. Today in Damascus, I met with President al-Shara and Foreign Minister Assad Shabani. I welcomed progress made and stressed the need for an inclusive and representative political transition. The UK stands ready to support the new Syrian government while we classify our own citizens as terrorists for protesting genocide. I mean, doesn't get any more hypocritical than that. And I think everyone can see it now. In the UK, of course, as you amply reported, Aaron, was the key sponsor of the dirty war on Syria.
And the reason why is because, I mean, it was the U.S. that was the main sponsor, but the U.S. wanted to keep a lot of stuff off the books. So they got their junior contractor, who was more than willing to come in and play the role of taking the reins on the Syria dirty war. So that's why so much of the deceptions, like the white helmets, were run out of the UK, simply because the UK was just jumping at the opportunity to show the Godfather, Washington, that it could be of service. And so it's really taken the Syria file to the extreme, to the point where they go and meet with Jolani. But yeah, I really hope that image, just as the UK proscribes Palestine Action and accuses them of terrorism, their foreign minister goes and meets with the former, as you said, deputy leader of ISIS, leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, Jolani. And that speaks to why the Syria dirty war was launched in the first place. It was to bleed and destabilize the forces in the region that stand up to Israel. And that's why Jolani now says openly that Israel and Syria, under his rule, have common enemies. And those enemies, by the way, include Syrians who are still being massacred if they're from a different sect, because the wing that the UK and Israel and the US supported, that Jolani represents, were Sunni extremists who hate minorities and have been persecuting them and killing them ever since taking power, which again gets totally overlooked as Jolani gets a warm embrace from the UK and the US.
And the US, where the US has officially removed Jolani, aka Ahmed al-Shara, from its designation list of foreign terror organizations. They removed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which was the rebranded Al-Qaeda, rebranded out of Jabhat al-Nusra, which went through various phases, Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, and now Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, whatever, it's all a sham. In consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Treasury, I hereby revoke the designation of Al-Nusra Front, also known as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, as a foreign terrorist organization. Marco Rubio, signed June 23rd, 2025. They list any Palestinian organization that lifts a finger against Israel as a terrorist group, even if it has no ambition to attack outside of Palestine. And they're rewarding this character and legitimizing him following the slaughter, now finally confirmed by mainstream media groups like Reuters, of thousands of Alawites, families in their homes, simply for being Alawites, an attempted ethnic cleansing by a Sunni supremacist Al-Qaeda-inspired government of a religious minority, just filming the slaughter, filming the massacres, proudly torturing Alawite men. And this came out in Reuters, not just to document the massacres, but to demonstrate the direct tie to al-Shara's government, that it wasn't just the Muhajirin, the foreign fighters from Xinjiang, the Uyghurs and the Uzbeks and so on, the fanatics who stormed in with him from Idlib, who carried out these massacres, although they were the frontline kind of murder force, death squad. It was under al-Shara's orders and with the knowledge of his government that this was taking place, because they feared the loss of the coast around Latakia. And so he's, being rewarded. I mean, that just doesn't even register. A lot of MAGA supporters actually were upset about that. They didn't say the word Alawite, though. They just said Christians are being murdered in Syria. For some reason, they thought it was a massacre of Christians. And a Christian church in Damascus was bombed, I believe, 2 weeks ago. I mean, this will eventually come for the Christians, but it was Alawites being targeted.
There was a suicide bombing, and the government was notably quiet on the bombing. They didn't send any major minister, like Jolani didn't go visit the bombing, which you'd think he would do, especially because it's in Damascus, for obvious reasons, because the victims were Christian. And it speaks to just how effective our propaganda system is. That's not just the mainstream media went along with this dirty war and still continues to avoid serious scrutiny of it, but so much of the left media as well. And we spent a lot of time criticizing people. We don't, we know who the players are, but it speaks to how duped people were, that even alternative media got enlisted in this regime change project, which ultimately served the forces of U.S. and Israeli hegemony, which everybody on the left now claims to oppose. But yet on this major battlefront, this proxy war in Syria, which drew in Hezbollah, drew in Iran deliberately. I think that was the major goal from the U.S. and Israeli point of view, to bleed Syria's allies to help make them weaker in the face of Israel. So many people got enlisted in cheering on the same forces that are now being embraced by the sponsors of Israeli genocide.
Definitely. And one reason that Lamy is meeting with al-Shara and why the Trump administration is delisting Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, basically his party, is because they want Syria to become part of the Abraham Accords and to normalize with Israel. And there's a lot of momentum on that front. This was what the dirty war was about, was neutering Syria as a frontline resistance state, as an independent country, basically ending it as a state. This guy, Jonathan Bass, who's a Trump administration liaison, who runs an LNG company in Louisiana, is making a lot of trips to Damascus, hyping up al-Shara, and he's a registered lobbyist for the Abraham Accords, in addition to being like kind of a representative of U.S. corporations that want to plunder Syria and its oil sector. And what al-Shara has demanded Aaron, you asked earlier about Israel seeking territory in Lebanon. Well, this is interesting. Al-Shiraz said, you can't have the Golan Heights unless we can have Tripoli in Lebanon, as though Lebanon's government would agree to that. And there's enormous pressure on Lebanon to also normalize with Israel, as though Hezbollah is no longer a factor there. But Jolani is, his name is Jolani. It means he's from the Golan Heights. He was born in the Golan Heights on the Syrian side. He's willing to give up the Golan in exchange for Lebanese territory and then normalize with Israel. And it makes you wonder about his origins as well at Camp Bucca and whether he was turned back then as a kind of Western intelligence asset. But that's what this is ultimately about. And that's terrorism, folks. Terrorism means absolutely nothing. It's just a label that gets slapped on anyone that the regimes we live under are against. That's pretty much it. And the people who are experiencing the most terrorism are living through the Gaza Holocaust, are inside the Gaza Strip, where Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has just announced plans to build a concentration camp. This is the reporter who broke the story from the Times of Israel. Emmanuel Fabian, Defense Minister Israel Katz, tells reporter in a briefing today that he instructed the IDF and to bring forward a plan to establish a new quote-unquote humanitarian city in the southern Gaza Strip on the ruins of Rafah. They're not even hiding it anymore. The idea of the humanitarian area, according to Katz, is to accommodate initially some 600,000 Palestinians from the Mawasi area on the coast. That's like an area of tents that internally displaced refugees live, after screening them to ensure Hamas operatives are not entering. Palestinians will not be allowed to leave the zone, he says. Palestinians will not be able to leave the zone. Eventually, the idea is to bring the entire Palestinian civilian population to the zone while the IDF secures it from a distance as international bodies work to manage the area. An additional 4 aid distribution sites would be established in the area, according to Katz. So, I mean, this seems like an escalation to me. They're openly saying that they want to place Palestinians in a small zone within what was already a besieged open-air prison in the Gaza Strip, and then they will not be able to leave, and they'll only be allowed to go there after they're screened, which means anyone who's ideologically suspected of having any connection to resistance will be taken to a torture center. That's a concentration camp. That's a concentration camp that was constructed in the midst of a genocide. This is Nazism. This is the perpetuation of the Holocaust under the logic of Zionism. And they're openly stating that they're doing it.
I'm just remembering when Joe Biden said that Rafah, where this concentration camp will be located, was a red line for him. You know, that was after so much other destruction. Then Biden said, no, Rafah, we're going to protect Rafah as a humanitarian zone. And now it's the site of the concentration camp in Israel's final solution, caging people there and then kicking out as many of them as they can to foreign nations that Israel and the U.S. right now, I'm sure they're trying to bribe into taking and bully into taking as many refugees as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And someone, you know, I don't know if it was a sardonic joke. They said, 15-minute cashless city. And yeah, the Gaza is a testing ground for a lot of that Build Back Better World Economic Forum dystopian framework. And it's being tested on Palestinians, facial recognition technology, camps, all the surveillance of their entire lives. That's why Israel's tech sector is so robust, and Israel's Unit 8200 is so omnipresent in Silicon Valley. We have a new piece up. It's a reprint from Nate Baer, who's doing great work researching the Israeli infestation or infiltration of the US tech sector, on how many apps that you may have downloaded on Google Play or on your iPhone were created by Unit 8200 veterans, but their testing ground is Gaza. And that's why I think so much of the Gaza genocide is now being exposed, at least at this phase, as having relied on consulting from firms like the Boston Consulting Group, the Tony Blair Group, Israeli businessmen who are in the tech sector are paying for a lot of these contracts. And you heard in that description of the concentration camp in Gaza that there will be 4 aid distribution centers in this camp. Who's going to be running them? It's the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is the shadiest, most dystopian humanitarian initiative that I've ever come across. And putting the GHF in Gaza is key to this phase of the genocide, where they want to concentrate the population and try to isolate them from Hamas, and then conduct all of their mopping up, turn the north into annex the north, and then establish military bases in the Netzarim corridor and the Morag corridor. And we published a new piece about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation at the Grayzone because we obtained footage that was distributed by UG Solutions, one of these mercenary groups that's supposedly securing their aid sites. And it's the most footage ever released from inside one of these distribution hubs. So working with Wyatt Reed, I thought it was really important to review this footage just to show people what it's like, because they released 6 minutes of raw footage, supposedly to exonerate themselves from an AP investigation showing that their mercenaries were actually firing on desperate aid seekers. And I mean, this is what it looks like. You can see the ruins of Gaza all around, and then this concentration camp-like area where people have to line up. People have to walk kilometers and kilometers across a conflict zone where they're fired at by drones, fired at by the Israeli military. And now they're waiting for aid. Remember, a mercenary firm released this footage. No other reporters picked up on it that I know of, in order to make themselves, in order to do PR damage control. Can move forward a little bit.
Today, the IDF coordinated to allow them to come across to come and get aid. So they don't come on this side much. So you see, they took the telephone pole light poles that we have on the other side of the camp. They took all of those poles down and took them with them.
Look in the lower left-hand corner. You can see that there's a mercenary pointing his weapon at the aid seekers.
They took the telephone pole light poles that we have on the other side of the camp. They took all of those poles down and took them with them.
So he's describing just what a boondoggle, what a disaster this whole operation is. Desperate people who need firewood are taking down their light poles, and they're taking down trees because they have nothing to cook with. Then soon you're going to see them open fire on or near this crowd. Here for the first time, we see one of the mercenaries show their face. And if you look here, this is a Tavor rifle provided to him apparently by the Israeli military, and it's marked. I mean, this whole complex was set up by the Israeli military, but it's run by Americans. In fact, like if you look right here, I don't know if I can zoom in, this sniper pillbox, you can see Hebrew writing. It says Wolfman. That's a concrete company in Tel Aviv. So contractors are making money off this in Israel. There's the ruins of Khan Yunis. In about 10 seconds, you're going to hear them begin to fire at these crowds. They're calling in the IDF now for support because they don't know what they're doing. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, a mercenary is beginning to point his weapon at the aid seekers who are holding their hands up. You can hear the Israeli army firing on aid seekers in the background. You could actually see the mercenary firing live fire in the air. And it just goes on like this for minutes and minutes. And this is something that U.S. taxpayers are now paying for. The State Department is now channeling $30 million that it seized from USAID into this dystopian genocidal operation, which will provide the support for a concentration camp, an Israeli concentration camp in Gaza holding 600,000 people. And it was all spelled out in blueprints submitted to the Boston Consulting Group, submitted to the Tony Blair Group, as the Financial Times has reported. And Aaron, I don't know if you remember, we went over this PowerPoint presentation. When was that? In like March?
About the future plans for Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time. Check it out. Those were the blueprints that were submitted to the Tony Blair Foundation and to Boston Consulting Group for the future of Gaza. I'd found them quietly uploaded on Netanyahu's website in Hebrew. But I mean, do you recognize this? This is now like front page Financial Times story. Tony Blair's staff took part in Gaza Riviera project with BCG, the Boston Consulting Group. That's like one of the top consulting firms in the US. Netanyahu actually worked there as a young man. Mitt Romney worked there. Tony Blair Institute participated in a project to develop a post-war Gaza plan that envisaged kickstarting the enclave's economy with a Trump Riviera and an Elon Musk smart manufacturing zone. The plan, outlined in a slide deck seen by the Financial Times, was led by Israeli businessmen and used financial models developed inside Boston Consulting Group to reimagine Gaza as a thriving trading hub. It was called the Great Trust, and it was shared with the Trump administration. I did note that these kinds of blueprints, and when I was discussing this, were shared with the Trump administration. But, you know, if you're a Grayzone follower and you watch these streams, you heard about that months before the Financial Times had it, and we laid out the full plan. And if you're a Grayzone supporter, I would think that's why you support us, because we've been on top of this before the rest of the media was willing to talk about it. I mean, this is the PowerPoint presentation. There it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Looks identical.
And I don't think Gaza will ever look like that for some reason.
No, of course not. But of course, Tony Blair is in on this too.
Yeah.
The guy who basically turned over his country's sovereignty to the Bush administration during the Iraq War deception, and has been involved in pretty much every single, or almost every single, major foreign policy deception ever since, and profiteering scheme. No wonder he's also in on the Gaza dystopia as well.
No wonder. He I wrote about this in 2014. I'll pull it up now. That he has been at this for years, working with McKinsey after the 2014 assault on Gaza, which destroyed something like 100,000 structures. I wrote this in October 2016. U.S. government, Tony Blair and McKinsey plan to rebuild Gaza with sweatshops to exploit Palestinian workers. And I got the documents from a Palestinian businessman because they were circulating it. This is it from the office of Tony Blair, summary of the Palestinian Economic Initiative. And it calls for like cheap sweatshops in Gaza to produce uniforms for Israeli soldiers. It actually says that. So this is nothing new for Tony Blair. He's the master of disaster. He's always there to make an opportunity out of a crisis. And back to these PowerPoint plans, I wanted to highlight one part of them, which is taking place now. It's here. You don't need to read Hebrew to see what's going on. It starts with Gaza being destroyed according to plan, then people being put in refugee camps, internally displaced people in camps. That's Moasi. That's a vision of Moasi. Then some kind of rebuilding, but the rebuilding takes place alongside a parallel process of what they call de-radicalization, where basically anyone affiliated with Hamas or accused of affiliation with resistance is killed or taken to a torture center inside Israel. And then people are put in like camps that are envisioned as a Dubai-like paradise on the Mediterranean. And then, Project Neom, this sort of Zionist Belt and Road runs through all of the sold out Gulf monarchies. And guess what? Gaza Marine Port, what's going on here? That's also the Gaza gas fields. Israel gets to exploit the Gaza gas fields through this Gaza Arish Sderot free trade zone. And then finally, here's the Elon Musk Tesla plant in Gaza, run by like Emirati royals, producing shiny new cars, EVs for the people of the region. Similar to Tony Blair's McKinsey plan, where they were running sweatshops in Gaza. These are like sweatshops for Elon from the orphans of Gaza whose families were killed while Elon celebrated on Twitter X. It's not only disgusting, it's a ridiculous fantasy that will never take place. But anyway, you heard it here first. And now it's playing out. What else do we got? Want to add anything on this?
Well, just that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and as you call it, the Gaza Holocaust Foundation. I can't remember if during our last room we covered this, so let me just mention it, that Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, had an article confirming the obvious, which is that soldiers were given orders at the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Holocaust Foundation, to shoot people. And that's what this has been done for. And all this was done not only to advance ethnic cleansing by, just by killing people, by trapping them with aid, but also by replacing the United Nations inside Gaza, which keeps people alive and keeps the refugee status of Palestinians alive. So the level of, deliberate evil here and cynicism, it's impossible to fully fathom. This is a very thought out plan, and I assume thought out long, as you've been talking about, long before October 7th, and they're implementing it now. And it will get worse. It will get worse. It just is. There seems to be no stopping right now this Israeli death machine, which just has full impunity from all of its main allies.
I mean, they had to use food as a weapon and starve people in order to get them near these aid distribution hubs. And from that point, they will concentrate them around the hubs and enclose them and use biometric surveillance to prevent them from leaving and to gather all of their data and their DNA, while incentivizing them, according to another Boston Consulting Group plan, to leave. Families were to be offered $9,000 to leave and subsidize housing. Ethnic cleansing on the cheap and done cleanly, much more cleanly than it's being done now. So the leading consulting firm in the US, the former British Prime Minister, and a consortium of Israeli businessmen have conceived this genocide plan. And there's no move to hold them accountable. It's all playing out day after day. Meanwhile, the British government has funded a new study to recycle old allegations that we spent weeks debunking methodically at the Grayzone and others have debunked, in order to, I don't know what the point is now. They've already gotten their genocide. Provide further justification for the genocide. It's the October 7th Hamas mass rape hoax is back. BBC News. Hamas used sexual violence as part of quote unquote genocidal strategy, Israeli experts say. Oh, well, that's a really illustrative headline of the content in there.
Has the BBC ever described Israel in any context in Gaza as genocidal? I don't think so. Even someone accusing Israel of genocide, have they even ever reported that in a headline? Maybe they've reported it, but the fact that they make this headline that's the point of this new report. It's just to keep giving Israel and its apologists fodder to continue their actual genocidal strategy by recycling debunked claims of sexual violence by Hamas on October 7th. I looked over this new report. First of all, who does this report come from? One of the authors is a former chief prosecutor in the Israeli military, and it's, as you said, funded by the British government. So this is simply a Israeli state propaganda operation funded by its allied states. And the one new thing about October 7th that it attempts to offer is they claimed it for the first time to have spoken to a victim of not even rape, but they say attempted rape, right? So they don't even say this is a rape victim.
Well, they redefine it and say, people who are like forced to, or like they say, if captors proposed marriage to them, that was a form of sexual abuse. So
right. And that speaks to people who are taken into captivity in Gaza. But in this one on October 7th, and again, October 7th was the day when we were told there was a systemic campaign of sexual violence by Hamas. And one of the problems with this allegation was, as we've long pointed out, there were 0 identified victims, dead or alive. There was 0 forensic or physical evidence. There was 0 visual evidence. All there was were claims by anonymous witnesses that were debunked repeatedly. And we did a lot of the debunking along with others like Electronic Intifada and Mondo Weiss and Zay Squirrel on Twitter. So now, though, this new report, they come out and they say they found one person who claims she was the victim of attempted rape on October 7th. So not even rape, but attempted rape. And they don't go into any detail. All they say is we spoke to her in May, and her story was corroborated by 2 other people who they also don't identify. And that's it. There's no detail, nothing. So now, according to Israel, we have to simply believe that there was sexual violence on October 7th because one anonymous person, we're told, claims it happened, even though we don't know, not who this person is, but even what they said and what the people who supposedly corroborated her said. And again, this is not even rape, it's attempted rape. We still don't even detail. So that's all there is in here that's new. And what does that really mean? It's just more of the same. It's more of the same propaganda that's already been debunked.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to go through it in detail, but I would follow Zay Squirrel, who's doing that, and taking the Times of London author who really hyped this bogus report up, Christina Lamb, to the slaughter. But I pointed out Piers Morgan pumped out this report and said, to all those who have shamefully tried to claim there was no sexual violence perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th, the brilliant Christina Lamb reports the shocking truth, but there is no shocking truth in it. One of the major claims that was described in that Times piece, because the report wasn't out yet, was that women were found tied to trees. Israeli raver women from the Nova Electronic Music Festival were found tied to trees. That's a claim that was sourced exclusively to Rami Davidian. Here he is with Sheryl Sandberg, the billionaire lean-in Zionist propagandist. I saw girls tied up with their hands behind them to every tree. And, here's from the article, tied to trees, and all recycled allegations. Rami Davidian was actually cited in the notorious UN rapporteur's report on supposed sexual violence on October 7th. And then he turns out to be a complete huckster who was exposed by none other than Raviv Drucker from Channel 13 in Israel, the most mainstream investigative reporter in Israel. he was going to expose that Rami Davidian's claims about October 7th were made up from beginning to end. These are not slight exaggerations. These are stories made up from beginning to end, hair-raising stories that never, ever occurred. And right as he was about to go to broadcast, the CEO of Channel 13 pulled the plug and said, Davidian is a national hero and we can't taint his reputation. They're not really doing a whole lot of quality control with this report. And I mean, we can do a little more debunking, but it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've already done it. Zay Squirrel is all over this and no one responds. Like no one responded to me pointing out that a confirmed scammer, a mega hoaxer in Israel was one of the key sources. Zay Squirrel points out there were no rapes on October 7th as confirmed by Haaretz and others, citing Israeli officials themselves, but actual mass systematic pedophilic gang rape of babies, children, girls, boys, women, and men by Israelis has been confirmed and documented. And it's in Haaretz, they reported these teams did not document a single case of sexual assault or cases of genital mutilation, and on and on. And as Zay Squirrel points out, there have been numerous videos from the Sde Teman torture center, torture dungeon run by the Israeli military, showing Israeli soldiers sexually assaulting Palestinian male prisoners. And one of them was actually turned into kind of a national hero in Israel. And there are many, many cases of Palestinian women accusing Israeli soldiers of sexually assaulting them, but they never get this kind of coverage for some reason.
It's always a dilemma when these Hamas sexual violence fabricated allegations get circulated, whether to engage with them or not, because there's something demeaning about debating a issue like an allegation from one day nearly 2 years ago, October 7th, while there's atrocities, actual atrocities happening before our eyes. And even by discussing the issue, you're playing into Israel's game. But given that they still have such staying power after all the other fabricated claims were abandoned, like the dozens of beheaded babies. Remember that was taken at face value by everybody, but then there's nothing to support it, and it was harder to keep that lie, so that was dropped. This one is such a sensitive issue, and it's technically harder to disprove, especially if they're claiming that all the victims who were raped on October 7th, they're all dead. So how do you then prove that it didn't happen? But it's important to engage with it because you can still see the purpose of it, as you just talked about, used to distract from the actual documented sexual violence by Israel against Palestinians and also the ongoing genocide. This was the point of it from the start. It was so obvious. We noted that right when it came out, right when the New York Times, Jeffrey Gettleman came out with his baseless article, which was a complete fabrication. This was the whole point, was to continue manufacturing consent. And you can see they've succeeded because Western media is still parroting it. Like you look at all the headlines from this one Israeli report funded by the British government, multiple outlets all repeating the same lie. And that's the point, is just to create enough noise to distract people from the actual existing atrocities committed by Israel.
Yeah. And it speaks to the racism of corporate media, the same corporate media that's vacationing with Barry Weiss in Sun Valley, along with the owners of all the major Hollywood studios or the CEOs, is that they just consider it plausible that this is something that Palestinian men would do. Yep. That as soon as they get through the gates, they're just going to find any scantily clad Israeli woman and just rape her. That's what they were there for.
Including also, by the way, it's gotten so ridiculous that now the allegation is also it was done against dead bodies.
Yeah.
So, and because of the racism that's just inherent in all these people, in the Israeli propagandists and their media stenographers, they all think it's totally plausible. Yeah, that a bunch of Palestinian men were just defiling dead bodies sexually. But it's all considered so plausible in the minds of these racists, straight up racists. That's the only juice this whole controversy has, just straight up racism. Because if it was said about Israelis, there's no way anybody would ever believe it, even though there's documented evidence of Israelis committing sexual violence, including on video.
Yeah, Meir Shetrit. He's the Israeli soldier who took off his mask on Israeli national TV and became an Israeli national hero after he was caught on camera sexually assaulting a Palestinian male prisoner who was like a physician who suffered ruptures in his intestines. I mean, that's the sick society that is our partner, who we're rescuing from the consequences of its wars in Iran that we're basically funding. So, no, and if we were just lying, if we were just making this all up, we would have been destroyed as the biggest rape deniers in the world. I mean, two like loudmouth Jewish anti-Zionist rape deniers, we would have been wrecked. But there's nothing they can say. So we're still here. And they're parading a literal rapist on Israeli national TV as a hero. I want to do Iran quickly and maybe Trump Ukraine. Do you still have time?
Yep.
All right. Well, Iran is finally leaving the International Atomic Energy Agency after accusing its director, Rafael Grossi, of supplying the names of and top secret personal information about Iranian nuclear scientists to Israeli intelligence during inspections of Iranian nuclear sites or through its surveillance of Iran's nuclear program. And it was telling that Grossi introduced this report 3 days before Israel struck Iran in an unprovoked assault that targeted numerous nuclear scientists as well as off-duty military commanders and civilians. It was telling. And the report recycled old allegations that many of them had been discredited. Many of them were sourced to Israel. So it became clear that Rafael Grossi had an agenda. And so now Iran has left the IAEA. The cameras are off at Iranian nuclear sites, which were bombed by Israel and the US. And the inspection regime is over. I don't think it will return. And Aaron, it looks like Grossi wants to be UN Secretary General. Was that right?
I've heard talk of that, and the people who are most enthused about him becoming the next Secretary General are Western states like NATO members, of course, and that makes sense given what he's done so far. I mean, he put out that report, that IAEA report, which Israel used to help promote its unprovoked attack on Iran. And after the fact came out and admitted that, oh yeah, Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program after the damage was done. So it wouldn't be surprised me if he gets rewarded for a job well done by the same states that are backing Israel.
Yeah, actually, I just found this. This is from April. IAEA chief voices interest in UN Secretary General post. This is France 24. Actually, AFP. UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi voiced interest Wednesday in becoming UN Secretary General when the position comes open in 2027. So, I mean, obviously, if you want to become UN Secretary General, you have to have the US and the European powers, especially Germany, on your side. And if you want them on your side, you have to have Israel on your side, especially this administration. So it's becoming pretty clear that the IAEA, like the OPCW, which you ran a buzzsaw through, is completely controlled, and it's not an international or multilateral agency at all. And there's a lot of context that I think has been left out of the conversation. I was just going back over some old WikiLeaks cables about the IAEA. And this is when the Guardian was still somewhat challenged power before the MI5 raided it and took the hard drives. And then they put in, what's that lady, Catherine Viner. Yeah. And it became kind of neocon. But this is the old Guardian. Nuclear WikiLeaks. Cables show cozy U.S. relationship with IAEA chief. When Yukiya Amano was Grossi's predecessor, took over as the head of the UN nuclear watchdog last year, American diplomats described him as Director General of all states, but in agreement with us. And the cables are sourced to the American charge at the IAEA, none other than Jeffrey Piat. Who is Jeffrey Piat?
He is the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine who was caught on the telephone with Victoria Nuland plotting a coup, who would be the next leadership picked by the U.S. in Ukraine after a coup.
Yeah. Yeah. And say, Jeff, they were plotting a coup and declaring F the EU. Jeffrey Piat's a real roundhouse man. He's really been around the block. And his job was basically to groom the next director of the IAEA when Amano was coming in. And here is a section that I think sheds a lot of light on current IAEA business. Most importantly, the U.S. mission in Vienna believed that Amano would not see himself as a political player over Iran, a role the U.S. and its allies frequently accused his predecessor, Mohammed al-Baradei from Egypt, of coveting. In a July cable, Piat noted, he distinguished his approach on Iran from that of al-Baradei. He sees the IAEA as a neutral and impartial party to Iran's safeguards agreement rather than as an intermediary. He stressed that the IAEA could not replace the P5+1 political framework for dialogue with Iran, nor vice versa. In other words, that the key negotiating mechanism with Iran would not be multilateral, but would instead be dominated by the collective West. So that was his most important role. And then in the end, he turned out to not be compliant enough, and Grossi came in, and Amano died he just died of a kind of mysterious illness.
Well, that line earlier in the article about how he's the director general, but in agreement with us, like, it kind of says it all. Like, yeah, sure, he's going to pretend to do his job, but really he's serving us. And that's certainly how it works at the OPCW. It's not even a question anymore. Fernando Arias, the head there, which is adjacent to the IAEA, has totally been doing the West bidding when it comes to covering up the probe of an alleged chemical attack in Syria, attacking his own inspectors who challenged the cover-up of their investigation, denying them the right to speak, to be heard, denying that there was a cover-up, and suppressing any accountability. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if that dynamic's being replicated at the IAEA. And those documents from WikiLeaks from over a decade ago now, they speak to something very similar going on.
Yeah, they actually used the term ambiguity in Amano's approach, that he will appear impartial while siding with us, the United States. Yeah. So that's kind of what Grossi has to do. And now the mask is off. If he wants to be UN Secretary General, it's so clear what the agenda was. So Iran's next move could be leave the NPT, leave the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That would lead to another escalation from Israel. But that's where things are going. Mahmoud Pezeshkian, the Iranian president, gave it another shot, gave Tucker Carlson an interview and tried to appeal to the United States, appeal to the sanity of the American public. And I think, a lot of people back in Iran are saying this is a fool's errand. Like, we saw what the United States is. What's the point? But he is still trying. And Tucker Carlson received enormous backlash from Iranian monarchist troll farms and Zionists for giving that interview. But I thought it was courageous on Tucker's part. And that's what a true journalist is supposed to do, is to, and something I've always tried to do, is give leaders from countries that are considered official enemies by the U.S. a chance to present their side of the story, their narrative, and let the American public decide. That's something corporate media doesn't do because they don't trust the American public. So props to Tucker for doing that. And it's worth watching that interview.
Tucker also says in the interview that he's asked Benjamin Netanyahu for an interview 4 times and has never gotten a response.
Yeah,
So,
and Netanyahu never speaks to the Israeli press.
yeah.
He
Huh.
gives interviews to like Tim Pool and like right-wing influencers in the US, or he lets them meet with him like off the record, but he won't speak to his own country's press, and he won't speak to Tucker Carlson because it would be like, I think it would be more explosive than Tucker's interview with Ted Cruz, who's basically a proxy for Netanyahu.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
If you could ask Netanyahu one question, what would you ask him? Right. Or it's probably tough because I'm putting you on the spot.
Do you still feel you can manipulate the U.S. at your will, as you bragged about in a secretly recorded tape, over 20 years ago? Do you still feel you have that power? Because remember that there's that tape with some settlers.
You said the U.S. is a thing you
Yeah.
can move easily. Why do you believe that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great question. I couldn't come up with a better one.
It's on tape. He brags about it. I don't think he knew he was being recorded. He's meeting with some settlers, right? And he's talking about like, don't worry, we can get the U.S. to do whatever we want.
That's a great question. I would ask him, do you support a nuclear-free Middle East? That's another one.
Yeah.
But I think there are so many questions that he couldn't answer that he's never been asked. So he refuses Tucker's audience. So finally, the United States briefly ran out of arms for Ukraine. I don't know where those weapons went. Patriot interceptor missiles and batteries were not available for transfer to Ukraine. Could they have gone to a country that had started a war without provocation with Iran and whose own interceptor missiles ran out, which cost something like $300 million a night to maintain? Could they have gone to a country that received transfers of Patriot batteries from Ukraine? Yeah, a lot of those weapons went to Israel. And it kind of proves that the United States, at least momentarily, was unable to wage 2 wars at once, which has serious implications for the long term as the U.S. is planning a war against China over the Taiwan Strait. Trump was asked about whether he paused weapons to Ukraine, and here's his answer. What would we do without Aaron Rupar?
We're getting along with China very well.
Oh, yeah.
More weapons to Ukraine, as you said last night. Last week, the Pentagon paused some shipments of weapons to Ukraine. Did you approve of that pause?
We want to put defensive weapons because Putin is not treating human beings right. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
So who ordered the pause last week?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
I think that's a question for the
Go ahead.
He doesn't know who ordered the pause.
It was Pete Hegseth, his defense secretary, acting on the advice of Eldridge Colby, who's like a top Pentagon official. And look, I wasn't sure what to think of the pause. Like, was this because of a shortage of patriots, or was this just political, that they're trying to wind down U.S. support so they're no longer on the hook for this proxy war, or a combination of both? But regardless, it shows, this little controversy shows how brittle Trump is. The moment he gets asked questions about it, like Zelensky complained to him, neocons were upset that he was doing this, he caves. He talks a big game. He talks about winding down the war, but then he caves immediately upon being questioned and challenged. And he just can't stick to any policy that at all draws the acrimony of the war lobby in Washington. Now, as to your point about there being a shortage, apparently Trump is not sending that many patriots to Ukraine. Like, he's only sending 10, which is not that many. So that would then speak to what you were saying, that there is actually a shortage. But overall, the fact that he claims he doesn't even know who ordered the suspension. He's like, this wasn't me. It just speaks to how he can't stick to anything he does that takes on the war lobby. He never ever does, and that's why in his first term, after being elected on a platform of cooperating with Russia, he immediately goes in and he endorses weapons that Obama wouldn't send. Now, a big part of that was Russiagate. So great job, Russiagators, because that incentivized Trump to be a tough guy on Russia. But he also just has no consistent principles. So it's very easy to bend him into doing, as Netanyahu would brag about, to doing what the war lobby wants.
I'm getting hit with a storm here, so if my internet goes out, that's why. We're having like a electricity surge. Trump came under, as you said, Aaron, Trump came under attack for this for this pause from the usual suspects, including his own State Department. I mean, here's The Economist: America's ominous new halt on weapons to Ukraine may reflect dwindling stocks, but Ukraine thinks it's being pushed to make political concessions. So, that part of the press is attacking him. But also Congress, the war lobby in Congress. Hegseth halted weapons for Ukraine despite military analysis that the aid wouldn't jeopardize U.S. readiness. The move blindsided the State Department, Ukraine, European allies, and members of Congress who demanded an explanation from the Pentagon. So they've caved. They have completely caved. And now, I mean, it looks like they're sending more weapons, as we can see here from Trump's answer.
Mr. President, are you planning to send more weapons to Ukraine?
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. They're getting hit very hard. We're going to have to send more weapons. Your defensive weapons primarily, but they're getting hit very, very hard.
This was in the meeting with Netanyahu, I guess, yesterday. So Trump's changing his tune. He's finding the weapons. There is a problem, though. There is a very real problem with the U.S. ability to wage multiple proxy wars or wars at once. And that's real. But at the same time, Trump is not willing to use weapons to force Ukraine to the negotiating table. And Russia has no reason to go to the table right now when it's winning. Despite some tactically brilliant moves by Ukraine in Operation Spiderweb, where it used commercial drones to take out Russian strategic bombers and committed terror attacks on Russian territory, attacking civilian trains. These were not strategically significant. They haven't changed Russia's calculus, and Russia continues to take more and more territory, including Ukrainian mineral fields that Ukraine had already negotiated away. So I think this is another diplomatic failure from Trump.
Yes, and added to the long list. I mean, he promised to stop the endless wars, to bring peace to the Middle East, to broker peace in Ukraine, to take on the military-industrial complex. Remember, in his first couple of days in office, he was talking about reducing the Pentagon budget. Now he delivers a record Pentagon budget with the big, beautiful, so-called big, beautiful bill. And yeah, look, for him to make peace in Ukraine would require, given that Russia has the advantage and Russia's taken more territory, and Russia went to war with certain objectives, including addressing NATO expansion and the rights of ethnic Russians inside Ukraine. For Trump, given that he's now Ukraine's main sponsor, he'd have to seriously take on those grievances.
Yep.
They tried a little bit, like Steve Witkoff offered Russia something, but Russia felt that it invested too much to take less than what it wanted. And so, Russia has made the decision to continue. And Trump ultimately, there's only so far he's going to go, because he has people like Lindsey Graham screaming in his ear that he wants more sanctions and more weapons for Ukraine. And Trump doesn't have any principles. So ultimately, he's going to do whatever just gets him the most favor in Washington. And the people with the real power in Washington remain the war lobby. So that's where he's going to go. Yeah.
This should be a lesson to Iran as it tries to resume negotiations with Trump after he ordered the bombing of their nuclear facilities. There are other players beyond Trump in Washington that really wield power.
we're dealing with him now too. We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people. And a lot of them are his soldiers and their soldiers, mostly. And it's now up to 7,000 a week. And I'm not happy with Putin. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Yes, sir. You just said that you're not happy with Vladimir Putin. Is there anything that you plan to do to act on that feeling of unhappiness?
What are we telling you? Don't we want to have a little surprise? You know, one of the things we did with the attack is that you asked that question. I didn't mean to be rude, but I'm in a rude because I'm looking at some of these crooked people up here. So I'm rude, but your question was asked very nicely. But one of the things we did is we went over every fact. We wanted to get every fact straight. We wanted to have the distance straight, the number of pilots straight. Everything had to be correct, because this was a very important mission. If we failed on this mission, it was beyond the war that, obviously we had with Iran and Israel, and a lot of hatred, a lot of years and years of hatred, centuries of hatred. People have never seen anything like it. So we wanted to be correct with all our facts. So, what I was doing is just asking, it would be great if the media would be correct with their facts. That's all we ask for. So go ahead. So finish it.
So I kind of hard to understand what he's saying, but he says he has a surprise for Putin. And then he starts rambling about the B-2 run over Iran. He kind of like lumps the two together as though he's suggesting the U.S. will attack Russia. But he says he has a surprise for Putin. What's he going to do? Deport Lindsey Graham to Russia?
Either it's weapons or it's Lindsey Graham's sanctions measure. But again, Russia's already shown that it's not going to bend no matter how many sanctions you impose on it. And the sanctions are not going to won't even come against Russia. They'll come against countries that do business with Russia. So all the U.S. will be doing is just spiking global prices for everybody and deepening its own isolation.
Yeah. So I think the safe bet is that the Ukraine proxy war will be settled by force. The U.S. will and the Europeans will just have to basically be forced into some kind of negotiation after sufficient territory is taken from Ukraine that possibly could have been held onto through negotiations starting in Istanbul back in April 2022.
And even before that, the Minsk Accords, which would have kept Ukraine, but yeah.
Great point.
Yeah. Listen, I think this means this war is going on for a lot longer.
Yep.
Because Russia's moved very slowly, deliberately, because they don't want to, they do want to save the lives of their own forces. And they're taking their time. They're trying to grind Ukraine down. And they feel as if they can wait out whatever the US and NATO put into Ukraine. So we're looking at, I think, after maybe there was hopes that this would come to an end, I think we're looking at a war going on for a considerable amount of time.
Yep. And reporting this week that I've seen shows that Ukraine has lost 40% of its working age population in this war to injuries or casualties.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that is an absolute catastrophe. That's a historic catastrophe. Those are like World War I level casualties. And the West allowed this to happen. The West enabled this. The West pushed Ukraine into this. These are the bullet stoppers of the collective West, and the West provoked this war. And it will go on. And your book will come out, hopefully.
And my book will come out. I was going to say there will be a book you'll be able to read soon about all this by me.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to that and getting the exclusive interview.
Yes.
Unless you have anything to add, I think that's a wrap.
Thanks everybody for joining. Support the Grayzone at the links on screen and the links in the description to the show. And yeah, great to see you, Max.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. That was a great stream. It was therapeutic for me, not only because I got to channel Bob Dylan in defending Bob Villain, And yeah, subscribe, support any way you see fit. And we will be back next week. We'll see you all then. Peace.
Peace.